Good, excellent. Let's make a start. Hello, good evening. Welcome everybody to London Vegans. My name is Brian Jacobs. I organise the monthly meetings, and each month, for most of the year, we have a guest speaker. And today, or this evening, we have Amanda Woodvine, who's very kindly come to speak to us about the organisation, the charity VFL, Vegetarians for Life, which is helping elderly, we could say elderly, vegans, vegetarians, and she's going to tell you a bit more about the organisation and what she does. And hopefully, not say hopefully, but when we get older, we might be needing some help. So she'll be talking about that situation as well. So without further ado, let me hand over to Amanda. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thanks for the lovely welcome and good evening, everybody. I'm actually joining you tonight from a Victorian office building in Manchester. There are rumours that it's haunted. There is a mirror right behind me, so if you do see anything that shouldn't be there, perhaps don't let me know. But without further ado, so if we've not met before, I am Amanda, work as Chief Exec of the charity V for Life, and by night, just not tonight, I'm also trustee of a Manchester dementia-related charity. And you may be aware, if you've heard of V for Life before, that it is the UK care charity exclusively supporting older vegans and vegetarians and those who cater for them. But I'm often asked why there needs to be a charity specifically for older vegans and vegetarians. So the best way to go about this is just to tell you a bit of a story about a lady called Margaret, and I think this illustrates the need well. So Margaret's a long-term vegan, and she's now in her 80s. And unfortunately, she's developing an increasing number of health-related issues. And perhaps most noticeably, her eyesight is deteriorating. So that's meant that she's been disqualified from driving. So like many of us, perhaps you have access to a big supermarket. Margaret would normally go to that by car. She's not in a city, and do her big shop. And thankfully nowadays there's a decent range of vegan food there. But for Margaret, that's no longer an issue. So Margaret now is increasingly reliant on what she can get from the corner shop. And if you've had a look yourself or ever tried to do a full weekly shop in your corner shop, you'd know you've probably got mixed results. There's often a premium for vegan products. They're more expensive. There's usually not a great range. An added complication for Margaret is that she also has rheumatoid arthritis. It's something my mum also has. So she's finding it more difficult now to open jars and to open tins. So cooking again, it really is becoming more limited for her. So again, like many in this situation, she's looked into the availability of vegan options via her local lunch club. Now, again, as I said, it's not a big city that she's living in. This is a true story. She went to a local lunch club, asked whether there were vegan options. She was told, unfortunately, there aren't and there won't be, but she'd be very welcome to cook her own food, pay the £3 and have the company there anyway. So again, not really a solution. She'd still have to do her own cooking. Like many of her generation, Margaret doesn't have access to the internet. So again, she's reliant on the knowledge of perhaps a social worker or TV advertising in terms of getting ready meals delivered to her door. And you may have heard from the news or elsewhere, there's unfortunately a declining number of Meals on Wheels services in the UK. There's one company that does TV advertising, and if you looked at their range, there are only 2 vegan main meals. So you'd be thinking, Groundhog Day, which one am I going to have for my lunch today? Which am I going to have for my dinner? So again, there's really not a choice there. Caveat, I really hope, and I'm not planning to make this a talk that seems all doom and gloom, especially as we've got sort of Advent around the corner and festivities. I'm aiming for maybe 20% of the doom and gloom to illustrate why you need to get planning, and 80% of optimism. So obviously correct me along the way if I seem to be we're dwelling a bit more on the doom and gloom. But I hope that Margaret's story gives you a glimpse of why there needs to be a charity specifically for vegans and vegetarians, and why it may be more difficult in some cases to be a vegan in later life. Now, Margaret's not alone. A conservative estimate of the number of older vegans and vegetarians in the UK is around a third of a million at the present time. Most people living independently and hopefully not with too many issues. And in terms of care homes, we already know that around 1 in every 5 UK care homes has at least one vegan or vegetarian resident at the present time. So there are around 7,000 vegans or vegetarians in UK care homes at the present time. And driven by the ageing of younger vegetarians and vegans, this number is projected to rise. What I also find really interesting is this perception of the age of a typical vegan. You might have seen a few years ago now the British Social Attitude Survey. One of them was commissioned by the Vegetarian Society to look at attitudes towards meat reduction in the general population. And they found that twice the number of older adults compared to younger adults, compared to 18 to 24-year-olds, were likely to describe themselves as a meat reducer, if not fully vegetarian or vegan already. So again, I think that's worth taking note of in terms of, I just think it's an interesting observation, an interesting trend. Now, with V for Life being the UK care charity specifically supporting older vegans and vegetarians, just 2 years ago now, we commissioned something called the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Vegetarianism and Veganism. To save saying that every time, I might refer to it as the Veggie APPG or APPG, but that's what I mean, All-Party Parliamentary Group on Vegetarianism and Veganism. So we commissioned it to conduct some research, and we produced a parliamentary inquiry report, and it was entitled Respect for Religious and Philosophical Beliefs While Eating in Care, and is available in hard copy form, as you can see. It is available electronically via the website, and that's vegappg.org.uk/inquiry with an I. And the case studies in there are pretty grim reading, I'm very sad to say. Just to highlight one example to give you a feel for it, as I say, not too much dwelling on the doom and gloom, but just illustrating why we need to exist. There's a gentleman called John, and his parents had been vegetarian for over 30 years, and they had a pretty shocking experience. So John's dad was in hospital and had dementia, and even had a vegetarian label above his hospital bed. But he was regularly being given meat despite being a long-term veggie. And John kept raising issues about this until one day at lunch, John was there and his father actually requested a ham sandwich while he was there. John felt that this is a really difficult ethical position because he knew that his dad was this long-term veggie, but he'd not actually had the conversation with this, should his dad lose capacity in the future, how would he like his beliefs to be respected? So he let it go. He let his dad eat ham sandwiches. Now, many years later, John's mother was also diagnosed with dementia, but she'd made it very clear based on this experience, she'd just never want to eat meat if she was not able to make decisions like that for herself in the future. Sadly, his mum's health deteriorated and she needed a hospital stay. And there she was served meat on multiple occasions. This is really, really shocking because when John questioned it with the hospital, the ward manager apparently said John's mother couldn't explain why she was vegetarian, so she wouldn't be given vegetarian meals. Really, really shocking. That's an outrageous thing to happen. Finally, his mother moved into a care home that seemed to cater well for vegetarians, but it came to light that the chef had thought that vegetarians eat fish. So his mom had been served fish until, again, he was able to correct that with them. You might have heard of a Facebook group called the Vegan Hospital Food Network, and if not, it's a group for vegetarians and vegans who need support with access to food when they're in hospital. And the last time I looked at it, it had over 2,000 members in there. Now, as part of this parliamentary inquiry, we looked at posts to the page in early 2020, which is when the inquiry was being conducted, and 71% of posts in there were requesting that food was brought in to vegan patients in various hospitals because the provision there wasn't adequate. One of the most common reports was that the vegan option was a dry jacket potato with beans, which was being offered to patients twice a day. So if that's you, you're not being offered often. They found plant-based milks. You're not being offered dairy-free butter or spreads or other plant-based products. So if that's you, highly likely to be feeling hungry, unsatisfied, or uncomfortable. So in summary of the doom and gloom chapter of this presentation, the key issues that I'd highlight around remaining vegan in later life are the reports of social isolation, perhaps being the only vegan in the village that you know of, issues around food security and access to adequate vegan food, and that might be made worse if your mobility is declining or if you're experiencing digital exclusion. And there also seem to be some issues around training, understanding, and provisions in the care sector. So now I hope is onto some solutions, which is where V4Life has been investing its resources for over 15 years now. So firstly, in relation to social isolation. So some years ago, we set up a specifically veggie and vegan pen and phone pals scheme, which aims to connect older vegans and vegetarians specifically with each other. So to join, to be a participant, you simply fill in an application form, which contains a few lines about you, any hobbies and interests, and that goes in a membership listing that's updated and sent out to members of the scheme every quarter. So it's a lovely way to connect. We've had some reports of lovely new friendships being formed through the scheme. Most commonly, if someone's going to leave, I feel like I've got plenty of new friends now. So thank you. It's been a great service. Perhaps I can't even keep up, so stop listing me. One particular example that stands out for me is a small group of pen pal members organised each other to meet up, and they sounded like they had a lovely time at Drayton Manor, so probably having a better social life than I do through the scheme, which is fantastic result. Now addressing the issue of digital exclusion, so not having access to technology perhaps. So VFL has a couple of useful resources here. Firstly, we produce a guide. There's both veggie and vegan versions of this. It's called Veggie Meals to Your Door. So in many cases, a phone number and postal address are actually available for a wide range of companies, which obviously is what you need if you don't have the internet. So we research companies that do offer meals available for home delivery, put them into this little brochure. It's available completely free of charge from us, both electronically and in paper, which is obviously what you need if you don't have the internet. And it's something that we'd encourage our volunteers, our friends of V4Life to distribute. So whether that's via your local library, health food shop, GP practice, you name it. In the guide, there's also a section on gadgets that can make it easier to continue to cook at home if you're perhaps experiencing a degree of frailty now or in the future. Another guide that we produce also in paper form but electronically too is Take 5. So this is again paring back recipes. So this is a compilation of recipes that just need 5 ingredients to make. So that's quite perfect in terms of, well, I only need 5 things if I'm going to make a whole range of things. So again, do have a look at that, available on our website, and we really hope it's going to simplify the cooking process. Now, I mentioned how we can help with digital exclusion, and one thing that we offer is grants to help people with independent living. So we have a vegetarian and vegan fund, and a typical grant from the fund would be anything up to £3,000. There is an age restriction on applications to the fund. Broadly speaking, we'd say it's for people aged 65 or above, but we do accept applications from younger people in certain circumstances. And in terms of the sorts of things that can be purchased, quite a wide remit, really. Very commonly, mobility scooters are purchased through the scheme. They've been really popular, and they are something that can really help give somebody a lease of life to go out and about with their shopping, to socialise, to stay independent, and importantly, to stay in their own homes for longer. Since the pandemic, I did say this is something to help with digital exclusion. There's been a growing interest in applications for technology. So we've funded computers and laptops, which obviously enables people both to stay connected with family and friends, to come to lovely events such as this one, and perhaps get online for the first time. And of course, you can try using it for food shopping, which might be completely new to a lot of people. I think we've all had to adapt since COVID. Now, I mentioned Margaret's experience with lunch clubs and their unwillingness to provide a vegan option. Lunch clubs are organisations that V4Life's team of roving chefs, we have 4 chefs that cover the whole of the UK, doing a stellar job. So lunch clubs are organisations that the chef team reaches out to regularly. And we do have very mixed success with this. Again, it's often a closed door. But we felt it best that we could at least produce our own vegan and vegetarian lunch club catering guide. So that's something, again, that's available from our website. And we hope here that it provides both recipe inspiration for lunch clubs and also acts as a how-to guide for someone that's just hoping to get a new lunch club off the ground. Now, this one is available on our sister website. So you might have heard of Vegetarian for Life and V4Life. So to help explain what the difference is, Vegetarian for Life is the branding that we would use for the care sector to help people to find us, because searching for a V in an ocean of internet traffic, I think we're a lot harder to find. We do represent both vegans and vegetarians. We do have a policy statement around the ultimate goal as we see it being towards people switching to a vegan diet, but we appreciate not everybody's there yet. So we are hoping to be there for everybody. So just to reiterate, the Lunch Club catering guide is in the Vegetarian for Life website and available free of charge there. One other avenue that we're exploring is outreach to existing veggie and vegan cafes and restaurants. And this is something that our audience here today and anyone viewing afterwards might be interested in supporting us with. So like all businesses, your local veggie or vegan cafes and restaurants are likely to have quiet times during the week. So we're encouraging the cafe or restaurant to consider offering that quiet slot during the week out as a lunch club for older vegans and vegetarians. So in my mind, it's very much a win-win situation. Hopefully at that time of day, they can offer a reduced price main meal that's providing them that really valuable need for company and inexpensive vegan food for people like Margaret. Something I'd also encourage all of us to do is think about future planning. And again, V4Life has lots of resources that can help you with that. The first resource that I have in mind is our self-advocacy pack. So there are versions of this for each country in the UK. And that's because every country, of course, has slightly different legislation. In the centrefold in particular, so drawing your attention to the sample statement of wishes, and the guide also suggests some sample wording for that. So thinking specifically of dementia, or if you should experience issues with capacity in the future, you need to make it really clear that if in future your capacity is limited and you make an accidental choice to eat meat or dairy, that you wish instead that you have an alternative to this provided for you. You might want it to look similar in appearance to the non-vegan dish that you're accidentally requesting, or that you're perhaps even fixating on. And the statement of wishes gives you the chance to make that abundantly clear that that's your preference. And people that have seen me talk before might already know that there are only 3 fully veggie care homes in the whole of the UK. It's one more than when I last spoke to your group, which was probably about 5 years ago. So we have seen some progress, I suppose. So if any of us need a stay in care in the future, we're unlikely to make it into a fully veggie care home. Although you do have better odds because the 3 are based in London and I'm in Manchester, so you've got better odds than I have. Now, if that's the case that you're in a mixed care home, you may well be surrounded by others that are eating meat and dairy. And if you're the one that's provided with food that looks very different to what others around you are eating, I can absolutely see why people feel left out. Perhaps you've got some random potato salad or something and everyone else is eating some sort of fancy looking pie. That is what's leading to people picking at other residents' plates, or perhaps request or even fixate on non-vegan foods. So again, returning to my appeal, it's to consider using the sample wording in the self-advocacy guide and to make that statement of wishes. So if you're appearing to accidentally be choosing meat, you are given an alternative that looks similar in appearance to what you're fixating on, or they say that you're requesting, but it's making useful alternatives to meat and dairy where appropriate, and perhaps it uses fortification, so there's no nutritional grounds at all for you to have anything other than something that's the best of both. So please do consider doing this. It's literally just going to take you minutes to fill in, but it really saves a lot of problems further down the line. It isn't something that's legally binding, but it really must be taken into consideration in your future care. So lodge it with your GP, make copies of it and change it as often as you see fit. Still on the topic of planning for the future, and I won't be offended if anyone goes straight to the website while I'm talking at all, because I don't have any slides. So if you look on the homepage of vforlife.org.uk, and if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have a section on planning for the future. So we have articles there on green burials, ethical finance, and so on, and hopefully a lot of useful reading there. We produce even our own magazine, Vintage, and that again is something that's free to our supporters, which again I will go on to mention. The new issue that was produced for VegFest, so you know how recent that was, Brian.
Yeah.
So we have a section in the most recent issue that covers later life planning, advice on wills and powers of attorney, and it's a really great little read. Now, going back to the publications section of vforlife.org.uk, so we have a number of guides there. And as I've said earlier, the charity is 15 years old now, and it's really become quite specialist in its publications because we produce at least 3 most years. So we have guides on there on cooking for one, if perhaps the size of your household has changed over the years. Cooking on a budget, if you're now cooking on more limited means. We have the Take 5 ingredient guide that I mentioned, veggie meals to your door, and we produce a nutrition guide that is specifically for older vegetarians and vegans if you're wondering how your nutritional needs change with age, and that's endorsed by the British Dietetic Association. Then going into the really specialised guides, thinking of care caterers. So we now have guides covering all sorts of topics. We've got one on food fortification for vegans, for instance. So this one is for when people perhaps struggle to eat large meals and you need to focus on adding extra calories and protein to each meal so that you're reducing their risk of undernutrition. We have a texture modified guide. So this one is for when someone's experiencing difficulties with swallowing. So that might perhaps be a result of having had a stroke or dementia, and then a person may need their food modified so that they can safely swallow it, so it's not going to become a choking hazard to them. And with this vegan food fortification and vegan texture modified guidance, there is nothing else like it. These two publications were the first of their kind as far as we're aware, so we're really addressing unmet need there. Now, if you're considering downsizing in terms of your house in the future, there's lots of options as well that it's worth sort of discussing here. One useful website, if you've not heard of it before, is the UK Co-housing Network. And again, if co-housing is new to you, so that's basically collaborative housing opportunities for older people. And we've seen a few vegan specific housing schemes come and go over the years. We had a Lancaster co-housing scheme, for instance, that started out, as I understand it, is fully vegan. But the thing with these schemes is that the owners of the property changes over time. So as I understand it, the number of vegan meals provided there is drastically less than it once was. Unfortunately, they do come and go. It's worth checking the UK co-housing website to see what the latest developments are. And of course, sheltered housing, which you might also have heard of, is another option where you can retain your own cooking facilities and have a warden on site perhaps to check on you if you get into any difficulties. Some of those also offer communal meals. But there may be a time where you need a live-in carer, or perhaps you need to stay in a nursing or residential care home. And this, I feel, is where V4Life services really can help. So on our website, we do have a community notice board, and that's been successfully used to connect vegan living carers with those seeking vegan living care. It's completely free to use, so by all means do take advantage of that should you ever need it. In recent years, we also set up something called the Vegetarian and Vegan Memory Care Pledge. And this is aimed at care homes, and it consists of 5 good practice points around catering well and ethically for vegetarians and vegans, so that if they experience issues with capacity or cognitive loss in the future, your values will still be upheld. You can search the V4Life website, so you can search looking for care homes throughout the UK that have signed up to the Memory Care Pledge so far. So they've agreed to our good practice points, and they range from being offered a vegan-only table, if that's your choice. So again, you're not fixating or picking at non-vegan meals from somebody else's plate, through to being provided with that similar-looking vegan alternative if you've accidentally chosen meat. There have been over 300 memory care pledges in the UK and rising already, including, I'm very pleased to say, Britain's largest care chain, and that one has trained over 1,000 members of its staff specifically in the memory care pledge. And that chain also encourages 2 members of staff at each site to act as vegetarian and vegan champions. So they wear veggie and vegan lapel badges, which is an extra bit of familiarity that hopefully is going to help, along with other things, jog your memory around your vegan identity. Some people on the call will be familiar with the story of Serena Coles. If not, she was an early vice president of the Vegan Society. Very sadly, Serena went on to develop dementia, and she was found living in a care home where she was eating meat and dairy. Despite, we've got some wonderful footage that I think Brian was suggesting that we share towards the end, because it is on YouTube, where she was speaking in the 1970s on BBC Two, so very much prime time, and I can only imagine the viewing figures when there wasn't much competition anyway, like there is today for viewers. Just speaking so articulately and confidently about her vegan beliefs. So for someone like her to go on to develop dementia and go on to eat meat and dairy, it really is quite shocking and makes you think it really could happen to you. But interestingly, because I was just talking about the familiarity of symbolism and logos, so Serena's first visitor was wearing a Vegan Society lapel badge, and Serena was able to point at the lapel badge, say vegan, I'm a vegan, and that's new, which really illustrates the point of, you know, having that familiarity, having veggie vegan symbols on care home menus, and so on and so on. It's really important. You can search our so-called UK list, our directory of care homes more broadly. So you can find care homes that haven't necessarily committed to the memory care pledge side of things yet, but have pledged to otherwise cater well and ethically for vegans and vegetarians. We have an ever-growing number of members, and at the current time, around 1 in 6 of all UK care homes are members, and that includes 4 of the big 5 care homes by market share. And we do, I think, have a really good geographical spread of care homes throughout the UK. One of our most recent breakthroughs actually is this piece of work here, which I'll just point out the Care Inspectorate logo on the top before I set it back down. So this is so hot off the press, we actually launched it officially yesterday with an external webinar jointly with the Care Inspectorate. So it's called Good Care for Vegetarians and Vegans, and it's a document that is actually pinned under the latest news on both of our websites at the moment, so you're very welcome to have a look at it. But the beauty of it is that it can be used by care inspectors. So when they run a care inspection, we have an indication for the first time what practice would be associated with the highest care rating that you can get, and what would be associated with really poor practice in relation to your care for vegans and vegetarians. And I'll illustrate just a couple of points from it here. So I'll just read you a bit. So one of the recommended good practice points is, during the initial conversation in a new care setting, a person will be specifically asked about their dietary requirements. This information is clearly detailed in the personal plan, and staff ensure that dietary requirements are met. This information would be reviewed 4 weeks after the initial settling in stage, and a date agreed for the next review date. During the conversation, the person will be asked if they express their vegetarian or vegan belief in any other ways, for example, clothing or toiletries. If the person's capacity is affected or their cognition changes, communication tools such as talking mats that cover vegetarian and vegan topics should be used to facilitate the exchange of information. And that's just one recommendation of many. You'd need to meet that to get the highest possible rating in your care inspection. So do have a browse through the guidance in full. As I say, it's pinned as latest news on both of our websites. So very excited to launch that. Another real breakthrough this year was the launch of our own vegetarian and vegan talking mats. So obviously I've just mentioned them in the guidance, but you might have never heard of them before. Even in the care sector, a lot of people draw a blank. So talking mats is a visual communication tool, and it's aimed at supporting people who have communication difficulties. This might be perhaps someone that's had a stroke, someone that's living with dementia, or who has a learning disability. And through a series of visual prompts, I could get all sorts of information about you, about your values, your food, your lifestyle choices, and I could even get feedback on your dining environment. So, for example, whether or not you find the smell of meat or fish around you intrusive. As long as you have sufficient capacity to do a talking mat, you could participate and we could have a conversation, even if all you can do is point at things with your eyes. So it's a really sophisticated and useful communication tool. So we're absolutely thrilled to, just in October, so we've had a very good year, to launch vegetarian and vegan talking mats that we're now selling to the care sector. And again, there is news about that on the website. I am licensed to train in talking mats along with my colleague Kim, who's our director in Scotland. Moving moving on to how you might help V for Life's work if you're inspired to do so. So we launched last year a supporters scheme. So for the price of one bought coffee, or probably a jar of instant coffee per month, not everyone goes to coffee shops, you would be really helping to support our work. So as I said, we are the only charity in the world specifically supporting older vegans and vegetarians, and we give real bang for our buck. So there's more detail on how to do that on the V for Life website, which is vforlife.org.uk/join. I did mention a number of resources that we have, so not least the Veggie Meals to Your Door guide, the information about our grants and our pen pal service. So please do spread the word about those. And if you feel that you could distribute hard copies of any of those leaflets in the community, please do drop us a line. We'd be more than happy to send you some of those in the post. You might be interested in volunteering for us more formally. We do have a Friends of V for Life scheme. There's no minimum requirement at all if you do sign up as a volunteer, but by signing up, we will give you information about any opportunities that crop up where you can support our work. And you can find more information there, vforlife.org.uk/friends. And I did mention, of course, the usefulness of having hubs in the community that older vegans and vegetarians can link into. So thinking of something like the creation of a vegan lunch club, perhaps you already know of a local cafe or a restaurant that has a lull during certain times of the week and would be willing to open things up to form a lunch club specifically for older vegans and vegetarians. We do have a chef, Ollie, based in London. So if you're a little bit shy or you sort of know an owner and you'd like to link them up with Ollie, all things considered, we'd be very welcome for any suggestions along those lines. Now, I really do hope that I am leaving you with the 20% doom and gloom and 80% positivity. I hope that I'm striking the right balance because I really do think that tides are starting to turn. Particular highlights for me, as I say, have been the recent publication of the Good Care for Veggies and Vegans Care Inspectorate co-badged resource. And I can feel that the publication of that report is opening doors already, as has the APPG inquiry report. And we're lobbying for other care regulators throughout the UK in the hope that they're going to follow the Care Inspectorate's good lead with that. So in closing, I really do believe we're about to see a shift in care catering, as well as the much wider availability of vegan products through wholesalers supplying the care sector. Certainly as a vegan of 20 years, I was absolutely thrilled. Probably about 7 years ago now, finally, there was a catalogue of vegan products available from wholesalers. Because back in the day, first starting this job, I remember if you had a veggie or a vegan resident, I heard real stories of carers having to add on vegan products to their weekly family shop and claim it back on expenses, which, that's really not sustainable. So we are really seeing a change here. But also, I've noticed that lots of large companies now have environmental targets as well. And we are seeing software crop up on the market, such as one called Climato. And that's enabling caterers to easily calculate the food carbon footprint of their menus, which is part of your overall carbon reduction strategy. You can really see in black and white the significant changes you can make by switching to more plant-based options on your menus. That is all from me. So I'm happy to open up to any questions. I know that one was around which specifically are the fully veggie care homes. There are 2 TLC chains in Harrow, I believe, that I'm happy to share further information on. However, is the best form to get that to you.
Yeah, if you're happy to share that, I mean, you can send it direct to me, and I'll send it through to those on our email list. I'm happy to do that. And if anybody has any questions, you can either raise your hand or you can post a question in the chat box. And while you're doing that, I was going to pull up the video of the Serena Coles, and I was going to say thanks to Vanessa who actually emailed me earlier today just to remind, because and I'm sure Vanessa will correct me if I've got this slightly incorrect, or I've got this correct, is that Kirsten Youngsberg, who sadly passed away very recently, and who was instrumental in creating various international vegan festivals. She sought out Serena Kohls. She didn't know what had happened to her, and it's through her bit of research found out she was in a care home and that she was not being fed vegan food, and she went and visited her. So I think that's highlighted in this video. So just bear with me a moment, if we can pull this up. Let's see if I can find where it's gone on there. Hold on a moment. I may have to pull up another screen. Okay. Share. Show all windows. I'm a bit confused now where it is. Advanced. Oh, here we are. I think, is it this one? Okay. And hopefully the sound comes through. Okay.
I realized that I wanted to become a vegan because I suddenly knew that so much cruelty was involved with dairy produce. Nothing about B12 or many of the other things that we now have.
Okay. Hopefully the sound came through okay on that one. Just say any questions? I know two. Well, one's a comment that says mindful chef do vegan ready meals. I know there are various companies that are already doing frozen meals and other ready meals that can be delivered. I think if one's younger, then one just goes online, does a search on the internet, and it's fairly easy to find the resources. I think as for some people as they get older, not necessarily as tech savvy, it may be more of a challenge knowing where to look. There was a comment by Nishma. Let me just find. Social services budget won't cover the care in the Veggie care home. If somebody doesn't have any extra fund, how does one request to spend final days there due to having been vegan or vegetarian all their life?
That's probably more complex than I can answer.
Okay. Any other questions? I've got Paul, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi. Thanks. Excellent talk, Amanda. You mentioned the Statement of Wishes document, which I have to admit I haven't completed, but it's there should I need it. But the downside of that seems to be that it's not legally binding. And in contrast to that, there are sort of lasting powers of attorney. There's two sorts, one health and one financial. Does V for Life offer any assistance with completing those documents? I believe you also offer help with will writing. Could you just go into what V for Life can offer in those areas?
Yes, of course. So we offer a frill. So not answering everything in one go. So on the will side of things, we offer a free will writing service. So we've partnered with Free Will. So perhaps if I share the link to that with Brian is the easiest way. There is a supplement inside this issue of Vintage that specifically covers in depth making powers of attorney. So we've done an interview with a lady that runs Speak for Me LPA or something along those lines. I'll give the exact links to Brian. That's the safest bet. So we've actually interviewed her and got her take on, if I wanted to protect my vegan beliefs, what do you think are the best things that I should do? So as I say, we've done a lowdown with her. We also recommend, because she runs a podcast specifically on later life planning, so she's linked out to a couple of interviews. There is one with me on there, but there are others, so thinking of specific aspects of planning for the future. So that would be your most detailed resources, I think, just looking at the articles in there, rather than me giving specific legal advice that, I don't want to lead you down a bad path or anything, but we do have some articles there that I definitely recommend.
Thanks. Is that the latest issue of Vintage?
Yeah, so this issue of Vintage is literally from just before Veg Fest 2023. So
is that going out
to very shortly?
Right, lovely. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Vanessa, could you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, power of attorney is a bit of a two-edged sword. One of our problems with Serena was that her son and next of kin was hostile to veganism. So do a power of attorney now, but make sure it is a reliable long-term vegan friend or partner or someone you can trust. And do something now. I, like everyone else, done some of the things. I recently found myself in critical care. I know it's not all doom and gloom, Amanda. The Addenbrooke's vegan menu is fantastic. I've never had a word said other than what can we do to help? We understand you're vegan. Really terrific. I occasionally go on the groups and give that as an example, but don't know it goes anywhere. Anyway, I found myself in this ward full of people of all ages who'd been laid very, very low by one of these viruses knocking around. And at one point, they were kind of raising my feet above my head and all this sort of thing. I was a bit old-fashioned. So I said, well, what's this about? And they said, well, your blood pressure, we can't get your blood pressure up quick enough. We want to make sure blood goes to your brain. Now, that can happen to anyone, absolutely anyone from 6 weeks to 60 to 100. And you can come out of there, not dead, which would be all right, or okay, which I did. You can come out of there brain damaged.
Wow.
Which I didn't know. It really is worth doing these things now, rather than having people standing over you trying to understand what your wishes are. But at least I did have my power of attorney person beside me, at least during the day hours. And Stephen is a long-term trusted vegan, so. But if something happened at night, what then? But it was a sobering thought that there were people in there half my age, a quarter of my age, who might very well come out a bit brain damaged. Right. If either they came in too late or they couldn't get their blood pressure up quick enough.
Yeah. Thanks.
But the food was terrific, apart from the breakfast porridge, which you could have papered your walls with the stuff. You could have stuck your wallpaper on. Dreadful.
I mean, hospital food has not got a very good reputation at the best of times. And I think it goes back to, you know, even people who are sort of a bit younger in hospital, having a vegan, trying to get vegan food sometimes can be a challenge, or the quality of the vegan food can be pretty poor. And again, for somebody who hasn't got either all their faculties or haven't got access to the internet, then it can be an even bigger challenge. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Any other questions or comments before we wind up? Any hands going up, physically or otherwise? Let me just see if there's any. Yeah, Shabari, you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Amanda, for raising a very important topic. I guess, you know, people like myself, I mean, I'm only 50, so I'm kind of thinking, well, you know, it doesn't really apply to me until I'm older. But what, you know, what I'm hearing is that you know, it can happen. Dementia, I guess, can happen at any age, and it's a really sobering thought, actually. I've downloaded the document on your website with regards to the statement of wishes. Although it is a non-legally binding doccuments, would you say it's a good idea to have that filled out and carry that with you at all times, and also to have one sent to your GP as well, you know, as in now, before you're put in a care home, or before anything happens to you and you lose your faculties? And yeah.
Definitely, that's really good planning, making your wishes as clear as they could possibly be. Some people have actually gone an extra step and they have recorded themselves just explaining why their veganism is important to them, and again making it clear that if in the future you appear to have questionable decision-making powers at that point, you still wish for your vegan diet to be honoured. And again, if you are requesting something that's non-vegan, perhaps give you something similar in appearance that's using alternatives and that's using fortification if needed. So that's minimizing any future distress to you. Like, why aren't they giving me the steak and kidney pie or whatever that I'm now fixating on? Because that is, you know, you don't want to be treated inhumanely in the future, but you know, you can uphold your vegan beliefs and produce something that looks similar in appearance to what you're requesting. And I think that's the best of both worlds.
I was shocked to hear that you mentioned about somebody who wasn't able to explain why they were vegetarian, and so they were refused vegetarian food in their care home. I mean, you know, do they need to have a reason? You know, can they not say that they are vegetarian and that is enough?
It is really shocking. I think turning it into a positive, we do now have documented case studies showing what happens, the reasons that are given by the care sector for anything untoward happening. So, for instance, there's another case study that didn't go into in terms of the doom and gloom versus optimism balance. This was a lady that was a long-term vegetarian, non-mobile, non-verbal, that was being routinely fed ground up mince in with her meals, unable to refuse it. When the vegan actually carer looked at the care plan, she found out that it was clear that she was vegetarian. She flagged it up with management, who said, "Oh yes, she is, but we ignore that because she needs meat for nutritional reasons." There are lots of underlying semi-logic in people's minds, but the good news is, as I say, these case studies, combined with the care inspectorate endorsed guidance, are now opening doors. So I don't think for a minute that people that work in the care sector, by and large, aren't really caring and compassionate people, but I do think there are gaps in training. So not only are there recommendations in the Veggie inquiry report about how we can make things better, not least mandatory training on special diets for care workers, but I'm also being invited to Skills for Care regional meetings at the moment. So I have the first one lined up on the 12th of December to speak again with a group of 20 to 30 care managers. And this is specifically, the door has been opened to me because we have such grim case studies, and we've highlighted you really need some training, because I don't think knowingly you would let this happen.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you.
question. Yeah, thank you for your questions, everybody. I'll just say I'm going to wind up now. So just a very big thank you to Amanda for coming and taking time out and coming and speaking to us. And it's been an informative presentation and talk. Hopefully we know more about V for Life. And if you want to support the organization, it's vforlife.org.uk. I think, is that right?
Perfect.
And on the
Thank you,
YouTube
Brian.
copy of this, I will put the link underneath for those who want to click on that and find out more information. So I would like to ask everybody if you could join me in giving a round of applause for Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop recording.